Hello there, you're watching the Breakfast News on Rajya Sabha Television. I'm Ashwarya Kapoor with you. Well, the big developing story continues to be the political crisis in Tamil Nadu. Well, E.K. Palanisamy is going to face a floor test at 11 a.m. today. So will he sail through or not? Well, we'll get you all the details on that big story. Let us start with the headlines. E.K. Palanisamy to seek vote of confidence in Tamil Nadu Assembly. Paneerselvam appeals to MLAs to vote without pressure. DMK to vote against the Chief Minister. State set for voting for third phase of elections in Uttar Pradesh on Sunday. 69 seats in 12 districts to go polling. Hours after being inducted into the Mehbooba Mufti cabinet, two PDP ministers resign. Razan Ansari and Basharat Bukhari write to Chief Minister explaining reasons. Environment Ministry orders inquiry into fire around Bengaluru's Bellandur Lake. Thick smoke enveloped the lake and surrounding areas after fire breaks out in the garbage around it. And Pakistan Army claims 100 militants killed after Sufi shrine bombing, asks Afghanistan to hand over 76 most wanted terrorists. Well, our top focus continue to be the political developments in Tamil Nadu, and Idapadi K. Palanisamy, the newly inducted Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, will be seeking a vote of confidence today. Well, the assembly session has been scheduled for 11 a.m. today. He was sworn in on Thursday following invitation by the governor to form the government. Now, he has claimed the support of at least 123 AIA-DMK MLAs. Meanwhile, the Paneerselvam camp that has the open support of at least 10 MLAs has once again appealed to the AIA-DMK MLAs to think wisely before casting their vote. He appealed to them to vote against the trust vote and safeguard the interests of late Jaya Jayalalitha. Meanwhile, the DMK, till last reports came in, has decided to vote against Palanisamy during the trust vote, while the party has 89 MLAs in the assembly. And the Congress party, with 8 MLAs, has said that it will seek the High Command's word before deciding on its vote. The party has, however, said it will participate in the trust vote.
குடும்ப ஆட்சி வரக்கூடாது என்பதற்காக தனது உடல்நலத்தை கூட பாராமல் தமிழகம் முழுவதும் சூறாவளி சுற்றுப்பயணம் செய்து மக்களை சந்தித்து நம்மை வெற்றி பெறச் செய்து சட்டமன்ற உறுப்பினராக்கியவர் மாண்புமிகு அம்மா அவர்கள். சுதந்திரமாக நீங்கள் சிந்தித்து நினைத்து பாருங்கள். நமது இதய தெய்வம் அம்மா அவர்களை ஒரே ஒருவரை நினைத்து பாருங்கள். மாண்புமிகு அம்மா அவர்களின் உண்மை தொண்டர்களாகிய நீங்கள் யாருடைய ஆசை வார்த்தைகளுக்கு மயங்க மாட்டீர்கள் என்பதை நான் நன்கு அறிவேன்.
அந்த நம்பிக்கை வாக்கெடுப்பிலே நாங்கள் பங்கேற்று அவரை எதிர்த்து நாங்கள் எங்களுடைய வாக்கினை திராவிட முன்னேற்றக் கழகத்தின் சார்பில் இருக்கக்கூடிய 89 சட்டமன்ற உறுப்பினர்களும் எங்களுடைய வாக்கினை பதிவு செய்ய இருக்கிறோம்.
And ahead of the floor test, the members from the Paneerselvam faction dismissed Party General Secretary Sasikala and 2 of her relatives who were admitted to the party earlier this week. The Election Commission has also sought a response from Sasikala on a petition filed against her election as the AIA-DMK General Secretary.
The Election Commission has asked V.K. Shashikala to respond to a petition challenging her appointment as the AIA-DMK Interim General Secretary. The petition has been filed by the Paneerselvam camp calling her appointment against the party's constitution. The poll panel has sought her response by February 28th. It has said that if she fails to respond, it will be presumed that she has no comments to offer and it will proceed in the matter accordingly. A day after E.K. Palanisamy took oath as the Chief Minister, the Paneerselvam camp hit back at the Shashikala faction. On Friday, it claimed to have removed AIA-DMK General Secretary V.K. Shashikala and her 2 relatives from the party.
Respected OPS, supporters are fighting against AIA-DMK very angrily. This should be stopped. Mr. OPS has gone to Memorial. He is telling that he will meet the people in this district. Let him go wherever he wants. Truth is in our side. Surely truth will win.
E. Madhusudanan, who was earlier removed as a party's presidium chairman by Shashikala, said Shashikala and her relatives had gone against the party's principles and ideals. He also announced the expulsion of Shashikala's relatives, TVV Dinakaran and S. Venkatesh, from the party. Last week, the AIADMK had sacked Pannir Selvam from the primary membership of the party. The Pannir Selvam faction has 10 legislators, while Chief Minister Palaniswamy claims the support of at least 123 MLAs.
As far as the existing house, the Tamil Nadu Assembly is concerned, the majority is clearly with Palaniswamy, and Pannirselvam did try to get some MLAs, but he could not succeed for the simple reason that they were locked up in a resort. So whether Pannirselvam likes it or not, or anybody else likes it or not, the bottom line is Palaniswamy enjoys support of a majority of the MLAs. Whether they will vote for him tomorrow, it remains to be seen.
Shashikala is currently serving a jail term for a little less than 4 years in connection with a 66 crore rupee disproportionate assets case in Bengaluru. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
All right, so to get the very latest and analyze the situation in Tamil Nadu, we have with us senior journalist and researcher Jayashree joining us on the phone line. Thank you so much, Jayashree, for joining us this morning. Jayashree, as far as the Tamil Nadu situation is concerned, now Palaniswamy was earlier given 15 days really by the governor to garner the numbers, but he decided to seek the vote of confidence today itself. But the big question, does he really have those numbers there? And what if there are MLAs who vote, who actually cross-vote? Then he'll have a problem.
Yes, Aishwarya. The thing is, he must have decided to go for the voting as early as possible because the MLAs have been kept confined, and they have in fact only been released in a matter of speaking from the resort this morning, and they have gone with police protection straight for the session. So it's probably his calculation that if they were let out and they had chance to interact with people or with anybody from the Pannirselvam's group, then they might have switched sides. So this is probably the reason why he sought to seek the vote of confidence early. At this point of time, he does seem to have the edge because he has about 5-6 MLAs more than what is required. But the thing is, it's just a question of about 6 to 7 votes. As of now, it's 122 on his side, with one Coimbatore MLA saying that, it's against his conscience and he left the resort and he's gone back home, so he won't be voting. So out of 122, if 6 MLAs decide to not go with the party whip, then he is going to be in a spot of trouble. But I think they have calculated that keeping them confined and taking them straight to the session will help him get the majority.
And, what about the opposition parties? When we speak about the DMK, now they're saying that they are going to vote against the Chief Minister. The Congress has not yet disclosed how are they going to vote. So what does it really speak about the government in question and also its stability in the future as well, in case Palaniswamy really sails through at least this vote?
The DMK, of course, it's expected that, they are the main rivals or the opposition to the AIADMK. And this assembly to start with itself was never very stable since the DMK had managed to get close to about 90 seats. And in alliance with the Congress, they had, with 8 more MLAs coming in from the Congress, with whom they have fought the election in alliance. The Congress has kept a bit of suspense going, but just a short while ago, they have decided to vote against the Palaniswamy confidence motion. So if that is the case, the numbers still stand with Palaniswamy and this flop of MLAs from the resort voting in favor of the, in favor of him, and all the others would probably vote except for a couple of abstentions, including Karunanidhi, who's not going to be present due to ill health. So it's a very close call, but as of now, Palaniswamy does have the edge.
All right. Thank you so much, Jayashree, for joining us this morning. So it seems that Palaniswamy at the moment seem to have those numbers. Of course, he needs that number of 117 legislators to really sail through this vote. So what happens, we'll find out in about an hour from now. We'll keep tracking all those developments from Tamil Nadu. Meanwhile, let's move on to our segment, Verdict 2017. News from Uttar Pradesh first, where 69 assembly seats in state's 12 districts will exercise their voting right tomorrow, campaigning for which ended on Friday. Where a total of 2 crore voters, including 1.1 crore women and over 1,000 voters belonging to the third gender category, will decide the fate of 826 candidates. 105 women candidates are also contesting the elections in this phase. Now, prominent districts going to polls are Farrukhabad, Kannauj, Mainpuri, Etawah, Kanpur, Lucknow and Barabanki. Well, in the 2012 assembly polls, SP had won 55 of these 69 seats, while the BSP secured 6, BJP got 5 and the Congress 2 seats. There will be 25,603 polling booths in this phase, and the next 4 phases of polling will be held on 23rd and 27th of February and 4th and 8th of March. Counting of votes will take place on 11th of March. Meanwhile, today is the last day for the candidates for the 6th phase of UP polls and the first phase of Manipur elections to withdraw their candidature for the elections that are scheduled for 4th of March. And now with the campaigning ending for the Sunday's election, focus has shifted to phase 4 of Uttar Pradesh elections. Well, Chief Minister Akhilesh Yadav will address 4 rallies for phase 4 assembly seats, and SP's alliance partner Congress's Ghulam Nabi Azad will address 2 rallies in Jaunpur and Pratapgarh districts. The 54 assembly seats will go to polls on 23rd of February. Well, my colleague Kriti Mishra is now joining us live for more on that story. Kriti, now the really high decibel, campaigning that we saw for the 3rd phase of elections is over, and it is now up to the voters to decide as to which party and which candidate they want to choose. But as far as Samajwadi Party is concerned, and also in particular Chief Minister Akhilesh Yadav is concerned, this is going to be a crucial phase.
Well, that's right, Aishwarya. It's a high-stakes political battle for all the political parties. But as far as Akhilesh Yadav is concerned, it's going to be a litmus test for him, because after the family feud, it's entirely up to him to really establish the hegemony of his party. And actually, remember, Aishwarya, in 2012, the Samajwadi Party had 155 out of these 69 seats, while the BSP could manage only 6, the BJP 5 and the Congress 2. So absolutely, all the pocket boroughs of the Samajwadi Party, including Mainpuri, Kannauj, Etawah, would be going to polls tomorrow. So it's up to the Chief Minister Akhilesh Yadav to actually establish his position as somebody who could control the party. But as far as other political parties are concerned, specifically BJP, because remember Lucknow is also going to polls tomorrow, and Home Minister Rajnath Singh, it's the parliamentary constituency of the Home Minister of this country. So definitely stakes are also very high for even the BJP. As far as BSP is concerned, it has also put in all the resources to woo the voters. So definitely all the political parties would try to rule the roost and establish their hegemony in the 3rd phase of UP elections. Aishwarya?
Absolutely, Kriti. And as far as the Samajwadi Party is concerned, you were telling us that 55 seats out of the 69 was the SP's last 2012 number that it had got. But this time the equations have changed, because it is now in alliance with the Congress Party. And the most important thing is that, Mulayam Singh Yadav has not really campaigned except for his brother and his daughter-in-law. So how is that really playing on the minds of the voters that you've spoken to so far?
Well, right, Aishwarya, the bitterness, so to say, is it over or it's still continuing? That is the question that is ruling the minds of the voters, because every now and then, if you see Akhilesh Yadav during his election rallies, he continues to take pot shots at his uncle Shivpal Yadav. And remember, Aishwarya, Shivpal Yadav is also contesting from Jaswant Nagar seat, which also goes to polls tomorrow. Yes. So definitely that family feud, that family bitterness hasn't simmered down as yet. So voters are left confused. Even the party cadre is also confused as to where would the allegiance and the loyalties lie. So definitely voters would have to check out their strategy and go in and vote for the party that they believe that could provide political stability in the state. Aishwarya?
And Kriti, as far as BJP is concerned, this is one of the very significant phases for BJP because it is really fancying its chances this time because it is looking for the upper other backward castes that it has been really looking to rally. So it is really fancying its chances, especially third phase of elections.
That's right, Aishwarya, because many political observers say that UP elections and particularly all the state elections and specifically UP elections would be a referendum on Narendra Modi's government on demonetization. So political parties are making, the opposition political parties are making demonetization one of the issues, but BJP is absolutely confident that if demonetization is the issue, it's going to sweep the polls. And as far as caste equations are concerned, it is harping on that kind of social engineering, wooing all sections of the voters and saying that we practice the theory of empowerment and not entitlement. So definitely very crucial for the BJP as well, because remember it said that the road to center goes through Lucknow. Yes. So of course in 2014 assembly elections they had a thumping majority in UP. They had almost 73 MPs from UP itself.
Right.
So they would be fancying this chance of actually capitalizing on the voters and emerging victorious yet again. Aishwarya?
All right, Kriti, thank you so much for those details there. We'll keep coming back to you in the subsequent bulletins. And in news at 10, we'll take a very short break. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
I'm Amitanshu Rai, and you're watching Constitutionally Yours. The word environment is always used to cover certain larger issues.
The first priority of the government is to protect the environment.
Providing good environment of life to the citizen is a fundamental right.
Corporate lobbying by the industrialists is negatively affecting the working strategy.
Sanctions were given by the Environment Ministry for so many industries, for corporate lobbies.
Join us as we try to understand contemporary issues related to the Constitution. Watch Constitutionally Yours on Rajya Sabha Television.
Welcome back. News from Jammu and Kashmir now. And hours after being inducted into the ministry, now two senior PDP leaders have resigned from the J&K, now Chief Minister Mehbooba Mufti's cabinet. Well, the move comes after Chief Minister Mufti expanded the cabinet for the first time since she took over the government into April 2016. Well, as per reports, both these leaders, Raza Ansari and Basharat Bukhari, were not happy with the portfolios that were assigned to them. Well, Basharat Bukhari was assigned the horticulture portfolio, and earlier he headed the Revenue Relief and Rehabilitation Ministry, while Raza Ansari was assigned the portfolio of Information Technology, Technical Education and Sports. Well, there has been no word so far from the Chief Minister's office on whether these resignations have been accepted or not. News from the northeast now, and Nagaland Governor P.B. Acharya on Friday met President Pranab Mukherjee and apprised him about the situation in the state. Now, Chief Minister T.R. Zeling is also in the national capital to meet the central leadership in an apparent bid to save his chair after 42 of the 49 MLAs of his party switched support to Shuro Zelia as the next Chief Minister. Well, unrest in Nagaland continues with the indefinite ban being called by several organizations demanding Zeling's resignation. Well, a statement issued by the Chief Minister's office said that the Governor and Chief Minister are more concerned about the likelihood of President's rule being imposed by the centre, which will not solve the social unrest that the state is going through right now. Nagaland, remember, has been in turmoil since the state government decided to hold local body elections in 12 towns across the state. Now, three people were also killed in the clashes between police and the public.
वहाँ शांति वापस आए और जो एक लेजिस्लेटिव प्रोसेस है वो चल सके और वहाँ सरकारी ऑफिसर्स वगैरह ठीक से काम कर सके, उसके लिए सब लोग प्रयास कर रहे हैं.
And the GST Council will meet today in Udaipur with an aim to approve the final draft supporting the centralized tax regime. Well, a consensus has been reached on all the contentious issues. The centre is hopeful that the 10th meeting of the GST Council will also give its nod to the final drafts of all the legislations, including the central GST bill and the state GST bill. Well, the Council's nod will pave the way for 3 bills to be tabled in Parliament in the second half of the budget session beginning 9th of March. Well, the Law Ministry has reportedly vetted the legislations with all the changes that were agreed upon by both the sides. The focus now will be on the finalization of rules under the new tax regime. The passage of the bills at the earliest is essential for the government to meet its revised GST implementation deadline of 1st of July this year. And a look at what else is making news across the country nationwide. The Indian Navy on Friday sealed a 200 crore rupees deal with Tata-backed Nova Integrated System Limited for procurement of over 24 surveillance radars. But it is being called the first such contract by an armed force under the buy and make category. But the procurement of surface surveillance radar is part of the Navy's plan for modernization of its fleet. Now, these systems will also be installed on board the ships under construction. Meanwhile, Indian Navy's second ocean-going sailboat INSV Tarini will be inducted today. Well, Admiral Sunil Lamba will be present at the formal function being held in Goa today. But Tarini is the platform for the first Indian all-women expedition of the global circumnavigation. Now, built to a stock designed by Van de Stad of the Netherlands, the boat carries a suite of 6 sails and boasts an array of satellite communication systems. The Enforcement Directorate on Friday attached the assets of around 7 crore rupees of Delhi-based lawyer Rohit Tandon and others in the post-demonetization scam. Well, this after movable assets of around 42 crore rupees had also been attached under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Well, the assets were allegedly laundered through illegal money following the demonetization of high-value currency notes in December last year. Well, India has once again expressed disappointment over the United Nations' inability to define terrorism during the current challenging times. Well, at the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting in Bonn, the Minister of State for External Affairs, M.J. Akbar, said that it is naive to believe that terrorists have no political objectives. He said, and I quote, "Radical terror factories like Daesh, Boko Haram and their allies or surrogates like the Lashkar-e-Toiba are challenging the nation state, which is the principal building block of the architecture of stability after the collapse of the age of empires and colonization," quote unquote. Well, Akbar's strong remarks came in the backdrop of UN Sanctions Committee failing to proscribe JEM chief Masood Azhar as a terrorist in view of China's strong opposition. Now, Akbar also proposed a creation of a G20 working group on terrorism. News from Pakistan now. Well, the country says that it has killed more than 100 militants in a crackdown following attack on a Sufi shrine that left at least 80 people dead. Well, on a Thursday, a suicide bomber blew himself up among devotees at a Sufi shrine in the town of Saiwan, with the Islamic State claiming responsibility. Well, Pakistan has now reacted with raids across the country. Some 18 militants were killed in southern Sindh province, where the Sufi shrine is located, and another 13 in northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Well, it is unclear where the other alleged terrorists were killed. Well, border crossings with Afghanistan have been closed and the rockets have also been fired into 2 Afghan provinces. Remember, Pakistan and Afghanistan have long accused each other of giving shelter to militants that roam across their border. The Pakistani army on Thursday also summoned Afghan diplomats to its headquarters and gave them a list of 76 militants whom Pakistani officials claim are hiding in Afghanistan, urging Afghanistan authorities to hand over the militants as soon as possible. Remember, the blast at the popular shrine was one of the deadliest in Pakistan in years and came after at least 7 attacks this week. News from Bengaluru. Well, the Environment Ministry has ordered an inquiry into the fire at the Belandur Lake in Bengaluru, where smoke choked the entire city, apparently after a pile of garbage around the lake caused fire. Well, this is the 3rd instance when the lake caught fire. Factory waste and general sewage have led to extreme levels of water pollution in the lake already.
Fire broke out in the highly polluted waters of Belandur Lake in Bengaluru last evening. The flames raged for a while as the area was enveloped in smoke. Even fire department personnel found themselves in a perplexing situation after seeing dense smoke emerging from the lake. Residents living near the lake were left panicked.
जो जितना भी ये आग लगा शायद मेरे ख्याल से जो केमिकल वगैरह जो फैक्ट्री से आता है उसकी वजह से प्रदूषण की वजह से ये आग लगा जैसा लग रहा है मेरे.
Getting like mixed in water and it's forming of chemical and it is within mixed with like fire and it's injurious to humans also.
पानी इधर से आता है पूरा मस्किटो ज्यादा है बहुत प्रॉब्लम होता है सर उधर.
Pollution regularly causes the Belandur lake to froth so heavily that the foam can be seen on roads nearby. And fires are often sparked by deadly effluents in the lake. But officials claim that this time it was a pile of burning garbage that caused the scare.
This is the third time that the same lake has actually caught fire, and we've actually seen in Bangalore that most of the lakes are actually, there's toxins, there's froth that actually spills over to the roads of Bangalore. So it's a serious concern when it is about environment, and at the same time also the impact that it actually has on human health.
Belandur and Varthur are the two major lakes in Bengaluru. Of late, both have been ruined because of the constant dumping of untreated sewage and toxic chemicals and detergents from the nearby small factories. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
News from the US now, and President Donald Trump's nominee has been sworn in as to lead the Environmental Protection Agency. Now, Scott Pruitt, a fierce critic of the agency, was approved by the Republican-controlled Senate, despite Democratic attempts to delay the confirmation. Now, senators voted 52 to 46 to approve Pruitt, who was later sworn in on Friday afternoon at the White House. Now, Pruitt is perhaps the most controversial appointment in the history of the EPA. Well, the Oklahoma Attorney General has sued the agency that he intends to leave more than a dozen times. Hundreds of former EPA staff members, in fact, wrote an open letter against his appointments. While critics also fear that Pruitt will be lukewarm on the threat posed by the climate change.
And in taking the oath of office as the administrator of the EPA, Scott Pruitt continues a long career of public service. He has been the Attorney General of Oklahoma since 2010, and I have heard the representation that his office has provided before the Supreme Court of the United States, and it has always been of a very high quality.
And finally, well, the two-day South Asian Speakers Summit is underway in Indore, where Lok Sabha Speaker Sumitra Mahajan inaugurated the summit. Many national and foreign dignitaries are attending, and the summit will have a plenary session for identifying resources for sustainable development goals, implementation in South Asia, opportunities for parliamentary cooperation. Well, the session will inform the delegates about the implementation of SDGs in South Asian region, and will also discuss ways in which parliaments can ensure that adequate financial and other resources are there for implementation. Well, the other working session will discuss on challenges of climate change, natural disasters and gender equality as well. During the summit, cultural programs highlighting the heritage of India will also be showcased. Well, the summit proposes to adopt Indore Declaration at the closing ceremony, which will be held on 19th of February. So we cut across live to the event in Indore.
Good. In terms of poverty alleviation, in terms of gender, with regard to primary education, with regard to making a number of countries in the region polio-free, we have had good results. But there are also daunting challenges. Let me just share some statistics with you. So although we have done well when it comes to the poverty goal of the MDGs, there are still over 500 million people who are trapped in extreme poverty in South Asia. That is on the basis of $1.25 per day as the line. So that's still a huge mass of people who are still caught in extreme poverty in the region. Now, if you look at the percentage of that as a percentage of the total population, it's 31%. And who are these people? These are not just statistics, these are people that we as parliamentarians represent. These are people who look to the parliaments to fulfill their dreams and aspirations. So it is vitally important that we actually succeed. And I believe as parliamentarians, we have a very strong role to play. Even if you look at the finances and the means of implementation, it's going to require a staggering amount of resources to deliver on the SDGs. Almost 10 to 20% of our GDPs, almost $5 trillion in addition to meet the gaps in infrastructure development. So the demands are huge, but the price is also well worth it, because this is what we are in politics for, to help people live their dreams and to help them lead a better life. So this is why we are here again for the second round of this meeting. We started in Dhaka, as I said, and at that time we looked at health, we looked at tobacco usage, because we know that every year we lose 1.5 million people in the region on account of tobacco usage. Not to mention the health costs, not to mention the people who suffer permanent diseases such as cancer and other complications. So this time we are going to be looking at how we can work together, how we can share good practices, because good practices will become best practices when we adopt them at a local and at a national level. So these are going to be hugely important. We will also explore the possibility of setting up joint parliamentary groups amongst the parliaments of South Asia. And they can look at areas such as women, child and adolescent health. They can look at climate change, they can look at disaster risk reduction, they can look at creating job opportunities for the young people. So we want to have a really functioning political mechanism within the region that is going to complement and help us achieve our national strategies. I think from that point of view, this forum, this platform is of course critically important. And the question that we have as parliamentarians in front of us is, do we want to be prisoners to the past, or do we want to, as champions, shape a future of prosperity for the people? So prisoners to the past or masters of the destiny? And we as parliamentarians certainly want to be the masters of the destiny of the people that we represent. That is why we are meeting here today, and Sri Lanka has very kindly agreed to host the third of these meetings, and I hope we will also have takers for the fourth and fifth. If you look at it politically, I'm not here to disparage the work of SAARC, but I think SAARC, despite the huge potentials, has not failed to live up to the promise. It is in many respects a promise that has not been kept. But we as representatives of the people want to create a structure, want to add value to the ongoing discourse, and through the Sustainable Development Goals, give the people a future that they certainly aspire to and that they deserve. I want to again thank the Lok Sabha for the wonderful hospitality and for the arrangements. We feel at home, and I'm sure the next 2 days will lead to the deliberations that we all look forward to. Thank you for your presence this morning, and on behalf of the IPU, I wish all of you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your comprehensive address highlighting the significance of this summit, wherein a new era of parliamentary cooperation is being heralded to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in the South Asian region. Now, before I go on to invite the Honorable Speaker of Lok Sabha, I must inform you that Sustainable Development Goals are very dear to her heart. She has encouraged comprehensive discussion of the Sustainable Development Goals in our own Parliament time and again, and has been instrumental in starting Speaker's Research Initiative, a research support services for the parliamentarians in our Parliament, which has held many workshops on SDGs for the honorable members of Parliament. And the presence has been sizable, and all the parliamentarians have welcomed this. Last year in the BRICS summit also, she made sure that the Sustainable Development Goals get a primary place for discussion. I invite now Honorable Speaker Shrimati Sumitra Mahajanji to deliver the inaugural address. Let us welcome her with a thunderous applause.
Honorable President of Inter-Parliamentary Union, Sabir Chaudhary ji, Honorable Speakers of different countries, from Bangladesh, I can say my friend Dr. Shirin Sharman Chaudhary ji is there. From Afghanistan, Dr. Abdullah is there. From Bhutan, Jigme Jongpa is there. From Maldives, dear Abdullah ji is there. From Nepal, our Honorable Ansani Gati is there. From Sri Lanka, Karu Jaisurya is there. From Bhutan, Dorji is there. From his Deputy Speaker is there. Then from Afghanistan, our Senator Abdullah is also there. Our beloved Speaker of Madhya Pradesh Assembly, Sita Sharan Sharma ji is also there. Our Secretary General, all the dignitaries on dais. I welcome all of you and also dignitaries and some MPs from Afghanistan, all other guests from different countries. I welcome all of you from my heart, and ladies and gentlemen here. Yes, it is really my privilege in welcoming all of you in this South Asian Speakers Summit. We in South Asia, it's okay. Yeah. Okay. We in South Asia, yes, have not only a shared history, yes, contiguous geography, but we will have to keep in our mind that we have a shared destiny also. We must work in tandem to achieve the goals for peace, prosperity of our people. Friends, the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDG as we call it, have set global priorities for progress of humanity. The SDGs emphasis on achieve a balance between three pillars: economic growth, social development, and environmental protection. I personally feel that this approach somehow was very much required in our contemporary growth and development strategy. This is a very close to the philosophy of life that our region always exposed for in last several centuries. In my view, immediate relevance of the goals to the local priorities at the national and subnational level actually holds the key. I strongly feel that development at the cost of our culture is not sustainable at all. Our past tells us how civilizational strengths may steer us through the contemporary challenges. I must also mention here that first and foremost is the citizen. No development is possible and sustainable unless it has a human face. As rightly said by our President Sabir ji, the last person in the queue, we have to look at him. At the same thing, as our Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay, India's leading political philosopher and mass leader, once he said, and I quote, "Integral humanism is the basis for development as it espouses indigenous economic model that puts the human being at the center stage." We have to work for this and like this also. Friends, Before I proceed further, I would like to say a few words about the city, that is my city, Indore, the venue of the summit. It is the largest city and the commercial capital of the Indian state, that is Madhya Pradesh. We can call it Central Province of India. The city traces its roots to its 16th century, founding as a trading hub. It is also considered as an educational hub and the only city in India which houses the international famed Indian Institute of Technology and the Indian Institute of Management. The city has been selected as one of the first 20 cities to be developed as smart cities. I would like to recall the legacy of a great woman who belongs to this soil and whose contributions for women's upliftment was remarkable. She was Ahilyabai Holkar. A noble, saintly and courageous woman, she had been a queen of Indore. Why I'm saying all these things? Actually, she was in 17th century, 16th, 17th century. She was a queen of Indore, but more importantly, becoming a queen, she was the queen of hearts of the people. And today you will find nobody call her like a queen of Indore, Ahilyabai. No. All of them, they say she was a Devi or as a mother. Mother Ahilyabai Holkar, she calls it. She is still remembered and worshipped for her great administrative qualities and dispensing justice without fear or favor. Today we are going to discuss women equality. On gender equality, we are going to discuss the subject. But I would like to tell you, in 17th century, Ahilyabai Holkar gave women rights to education, right to property. In 17th century, she did it. And that's why I think this is Indore is the right place to discuss about gender equality. I feel privileged to represent this constituency for the last 28 years. Yes, but it is a legacy. What you said is rightly okay, and because Indore people, yes, they are electing me, no doubt, but because only I am ruled here, I am elected here because it was once ruled by these legendary women. People still think that yes, women can do better, maybe because of Ahilyabai has done that. Friends, SDGs are aspirational and I feel reflect the wider expectations of our people. A goal without a plan is just a wish. That's why we are here to think about all these SDGs. Yes, inclusive and broad-based economic growth has to be promoted to reduce the widening gap between the rich and the poor. Ensuring effective delivery of schemes which targets the people at the bottom of the socio-economic strata of the society goes a long way in eradicating poverty and achieving the very first goal, eradicating total poverty. That is our first goal in SDGs. It is said that the 21st century belongs to Asia. Yes, all of them, they say. If that were so, the South Asian region, with its tremendous potential, I don't say that we are thickly populated, no. It is a potential. So, tremendous potential in terms of human resources and various other resources also. It is a resource, human resource we call it. It is not only a population. We must think in that way. Has a pivotal role to make it happen. This can come about only when we are able to surmount the challenges before our countries and the South Asian region as a whole. This summit of presiding officers of the region offers a tremendous opportunity to show the way forward to achieve the sustainable development goals. Our region is endowed with vast natural resources, rich culture and ancient heritage. All the South Asian countries, they have a culture, they have ancient heritage also, and they have ample resources, natural resources also. Despite this, we are plagued by poverty and conflicts. We have to think about this also. Nonetheless, we continue to focus on the path of development. Our governments have committed to achieving the SDGs and have set forth in the direction. In case of India, much of India's development agenda is mirrored in the Sustainable Development Goals. I am certain that other countries in South Asia have already aligned or in the process of aligning their national actions with SDGs with the aim to implement the 2030 agenda. I am quite sure about it. Friends, I am very happy to note that in this summit, we have tried to capture 3 themes: resources for implementation of SDGs, gender equity, and climate change and disaster management. There is little doubt that we have overcome many political, social, and economic challenges in the past century and are marching towards a better future. All, I think, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, all of you will agree with me. Yes, but now that is a past, and we are going for future. However, resources limitation is a challenge all of our respective governments are grappling with. According to some calculations, the estimated expenditure for achieving of SDGs globally is about 5 to 7 trillion USD per annum, of which the developing countries need about 3.9 trillion USD per annum. India is expected to have an expenditure of about $565 billion per annum approximately in the next 15 years to achieve SDGs. This would require help from all possible quarters, including the developed countries and international institutions also. In order to achieve effective, reliable development data collection is a major challenge before the policymakers. It is an important issue how we collect timely and high quality data. We need cleaner, better and latest technologies to accelerate the process of social transformation and capacity building support to catalyze the developmental process. A significant portion of these resources predicate upon realization of the commitments made by the developed countries to provide financial and technological support to the developing countries, no doubt, but still we have to stand on our own also. We all understand that gender equity is a crucial factor for the achievement of SDGs. That is, that when you educate a woman, you educate a society clearly applies to our social setup. Ensuring economic independence and awareness about inheritance rights would give them confidence to face the life as it comes. Apart from the discrimination the girl child faces at home, there is an urgent need for continuous efforts to be made to promote the welfare of the girl child, elimination of child marriage, access to reproductive health care, and overall emphasis on hygiene and personal care of women are few of the critical areas we have to concentrate. In addition to special campaigns by the government, civil society groups here also been engaged in creating awareness about how women play a vital role in society as they have the responsibility of bringing up children and the upkeep of their homes. Climate change does give risk. Women are most vulnerable people and therefore are most at risk from climate change. They spend increasingly long hours hunting for food, fuel and water, or struggling to grow crops. I don't know, but in India at least, 80% of women in villages, they work in farms. So in agriculture work, you will find women laborers are more here. So, and for water also, women will have to suffer. For fuel also, women will have to think about it. So all these things. Through their experiences and traditional knowledge, women can offer valuable insights into better managing the climate and its risk. However, their knowledge about traditional practices is often excluded from decision about sustainable ecosystems. We have to think about this. I'm only keeping all these points for all of us to think about. The countries of the region have acknowledged that the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is the primary international intergovernmental forum for negotiating global response to climate change that takes into cognizance the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities to protect interests of developing countries. Nurture the nature has been the guiding philosophy of Indian way of living, and I think it is for all of us also. I think South Asian countries are not different with this. Nurture the nature, all of us, we think in that line only. We are committed to a sustainable path to prosperity. It comes from the natural instinct of Indian tradition and culture. Let us work together to achieve the noble goals as laid down in the SDGs. In this context, I would like to quote another Sanskrit shloka from our ancient. All of us, always we say, Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahanu Bhunaktu, Sahviryam Karvavahi, Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahi. Means, yes, may He protect us. May we enjoy the knowledge together. May we work with great energy. May our journey together be brilliant and effective. May there be no bad feelings between us. And so there should be peace, peace and peace everywhere. Then only development will be there. So friends, we are also going to exchange views on regional cooperation and interconnectedness of our path to achieve SDGs targets. We all know the SAARC already has a mandate for coordination and cooperation to implement SDGs in the region, sharing of experiences in certain areas, and contextualizing targets at sub-regional level can also be explored. Success stories of public-private partnerships and ensuring corporate social responsibility can be exchanged to improve strategies in implementation of SDGs. Parliamentarians, who are often the bridge between people and their government, rightly said by our President, Sabir ji, they have a great role to play in achieving these targets. As elected representatives, it is our duty to ensure that our respective governments take concrete measures for realizing these goals. This common roadmap to end poverty, malnutrition, illiteracy, ignorance, disease, and discrimination, especially of the girl child, requires conscious efforts and concerted action from all of us here to achieve the desired results. We need to focus on issues related to intergenerational equity and inequitable nature of development between nations, requirement of financial assistance and technology transfer from developed countries to developing countries, enabling more equitable growth versus environmental concerns. Our interaction benefits the region and allows us to have better understanding of issues facing our people and to find ways to deal with them. SDG target can be met by us in the region if we all work together to achieve them. To conclude, India and its parliament is committed to working with the international community to craft an ambitious, comprehensive and equitable development agenda with poverty eradication at its core. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you will find this two-day summit fruitful and productive and would carry with you pleasant memories of your stay in the beautiful city of Indore. I am sure Indore declaration at the end of the summit would have way for further cooperation in the region. I wish all of us, I include myself, all of us, a successful discussion. No doubt you can enjoy our Indore, our media was asking me, ma'am, whether you are taking all of your speakers to different places. I said, to some places I will definitely try. Because actually, you know, Indore is famous for eating, enjoying this atmosphere also. And I can tell you, there are special markets for eating. It is there. There are 56 shops. We call it 56 shops for eating only. Like this. There is a lane, Sarafa. It is a jewelry market. But in the evening, you will find all the very, very good dishes you will find there. But I'm not sure how we can manage to there. But yes, our people really feel. And you know, our Ahilyabai Holkar in 18th century, she started a weavers group. She gave them all facilities. And those saris, those cloth, Maheshwari we call it, it is still famous, though they are called Induri saris. But yes, it is famous till today. They are working, all these weavers. That's why I call her a very good administrator she was. So I again, yes, you are very good. We are welcome here. And I'm quite sure that this Indore discussion here on sustainable development goals will be fruitful, no doubt, and all of us will again, we will come together, we will think together, and we will work together so that South Asian region we can show that it is not simply thickly populated. It is really a human resource and we will use it for better. Thank you very much.